The Christmas Letters, Celebrating Advent with Those Who Told the Story First, by Magrey R. DeVega. Chapter 2, Love Incarnate, the Word of Life Revealed. Living lovely, like Jesus. Having explored what it means to live in truth with one another, we turn to the second pillar of Christian fellowship in 1 John. Its call to love is a central premise of the letter and is an important part of our Advent journey. What does it mean to love one another in light of God's love revealed in Jesus? There are many words in the English language that are both nouns and verbs. Words like challenge and color, question and rhyme. Same word, describing both things and actions. Some of these words were originally nouns in their primitive root form and developed later into verbs. These are called denominational verbs. Words like dust, summer, and bicycle are all verbs that started as nouns. But then there are words that were originally verbs that became nouns. And in the Greek language, the language of the New Testament, the language of 1 John, this is the case for the word love. The word for love is agapeo, which is, in its primitive origin, a verb. It is later derived as a noun throughout the rest of the New Testament. So, at its core, love is an action. When Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as yourself," Mark chapter 12, verse 31, he was quoting the Old Testament book of Leviticus. He pulled out those 5 words as a summary of a larger set of actions that defined what loving others means. In Leviticus 19, it's a section of 13 verses that talk about feeding the poor and caring for strangers, not stealing or lying, treating others fairly and not holding a grudge, honoring the elderly, and caring for the immigrant as if they were your family. And tucked in the midst of all those actions in Leviticus 19 are those 5 words: love your neighbor as yourself. Love is not just something we fall into or create or feel for someone else. It is not just a goal or an ideal. It is more than simply a core quality of Christian character. Love is something we do. It is a deliberate choice to orient our hearts and minds in a certain way toward other people. It does not come naturally. Other base instincts would want us to treat others in ways that create distance and separation from one another. Love takes effort. It involves risk. It can result in disappointment and sometimes even grief. In other words, to love means to grow. Dr. David Gushee quotes the great Reinhold Niebuhr in his book Introducing Christian Ethics. He writes, "Niebuhr suggests that love is always beckoning us to transcendent heights, which we can never quite reach, but to which we must continually aspire. Love constantly calls us to greater purity in our motivations and greater breadth of application in practice. We must love, not just a little, but more. Then more, then more. We must love not just self, but partner. Not just partner, but children. Not just children, but neighbors, and on and on. We must love with more intelligence, more effectiveness, more care, more self-giving. If we think we have arrived at love, we know nothing about it." Love is first a verb before it is a noun, so love involves movement, growth, and change. And it makes sense for love to involve change, right? Because after all, love involves relationships, and relationships change over time. Every relationship does, whether it's your relationship with your partner or your children or your parents. Whether it's with your coworkers, your community, or even God, the nature of your relationship changes. So you must adapt the ways you express and share love in that relationship. I love the way Dr. Gushee describes how the love between parents and children changes over time. As for the relationship between parents and children, it goes through stages. When our children are little, we sacrifice greatly. There is little mutuality, and there is more than occasional rescuing required. As the children grow, the mutuality between parent and child grows in lovingly ways. Though there is always the possibility of arduous sacrifice or occasional urgent effort to deliver from disaster. When we get old, the balance shifts, and we may be the ones who need our grown children to sacrifice for us, or even to rescue us. Relationships change, so the way we love in those relationships must also change. In fact, there is another word that is both a noun and verb. It's the word time. And in some ways, love and time are deeply connected. Loving others takes time. The way we learn to love one another changes over time. Sometimes we can't fully appreciate how others have loved us until time has passed, and we see it in retrospect. And here's something else when we all know about time. Each of us has a limited amount of time in our lifetimes. As we age, time becomes more of a pressure than a privilege. We push ourselves to accomplish more, and there never seems to be enough time in a day. We hit a point in our lives, some people call it midlife, when we realize that there is more time behind us than before us. And as much as we plan and order our lives, we realize that time feels like it is slipping through our fingers. As time marches on, we feel more restless. And that's when we most need to remember that the greatest use of our time is spending it with love. One of the greatest privileges I have as a pastor is to be alongside families in the immediate wake of a loved one's death. As we plan the funeral service together, I listen for stories and memories they share with me. And every time, there is a common denominator among all those stories, among all the different families that I have ministered to over the years. People aren't best remembered by their possessions or their achievements. They aren't celebrated for their toys or trophies. What a family remembers most are the relationships. What they remember most is that person's love throughout their time with them. We all have a limited amount of time, but the love we share can make an unlimited impact.